And hello, Father, and how are you?
Good evening. Yes, I'm well, thank goodness. Yeah, beautiful evening.
Is it a beautiful evening, Kerry? It is.
Oh, it is. Sun is shining. It's dry.
Wow, very good. Okay,
Uh,
good. Because the wee torrential rain. Anyway, okay. So today I want to discuss the idea that I've come up with that we spoke about earlier on, is to protect children online in Ireland. There's a lot of talk at the moment about digital ID, age verification, and how governments can stop children from accessing harmful content online. So I came up with an idea after thinking about it because technology is kind of my area. Um, So my idea is a parent verified child safe mobile phone. Instead of asking children to prove their age again and again online, the parent verifies their own identity when buying or activating the phone. The phone is then recognized as a child's device and is automatically restricted to age appropriate content on the internet. So in other words, all the websites and the social media automatically recognize that that phone is restricted to an age of 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds, whatever the band might be. Um, so that's the idea generally. So, do you think Ireland needs a stronger system to protect children from harmful online content?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that Ireland really cares about children that much.
Oh
When
God.
you see what happens and when you see how they treat the child in the womb. I mean, anything that comes out of the government to me is suspect in terms of caring. I mean, they couch it in religious terms, but they're disingenuous for the most part. But I agree with you. Children need every possible protection, and especially protection from voices that are not out for their good or for their well-being. And of course, most of the voices on social media are not child friendly. They're certainly not Christian friendly, and to me that's a real concern. I mean, we see, for example, what the government is allowing in the schools under the guise of sex education. I mean, that to me belies the government when it says, "Oh, we need to protect children." What we need to do, I think, and you've intimated that what is really necessary is that parents get back their role as parents, and they're the teachers, they're the leaders, and the children, they're the students, they're the followers. And so I think something can be done, and I think your idea is a pretty good idea to help parents to supervise their children. I mean, I would also say too, and of course, probably people would laugh and say, "Well, you're kind of belong to another era." But I mean, I would question why any child up until 18 years old has any need for a phone. And actually, I think the use of the phone has interfered with children's ability to entertain themselves, to converse with one another, and even to be conscious of other people. They're so locked into their phones that they're totally oblivious of the fact that there are other people around and the importance of socialization, which I think the phones have pretty much killed. And of course, not just with children, but also with adults as well. So yeah, I agree with you in principle. Yeah, there's a need to help parents,
Okay.
to protect their children. Yes.
There's a local shop, and they employ children between the age of 16 and 18. Sometimes there's three or four of them in the
Hmm.
tills,
Yeah.
and I would consider them to have advanced addiction to phones because I tell you why. They're doing the till, and then just as the next customer, there could be a queue of customers. They check their phone quickly and they text really quickly, 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 right? And then they put the phone away and then, hello, how are you? And then they scan the item, okay? Then the next that customer goes away and then they're back on again. And I've seen a poor girl yesterday and I felt like saying to her, she was so stressed. Something was going on, maybe with her mother or family or a boyfriend or
Right.
something. She was so stressed looking at the phone frantically, okay, and so agitated that I thought, okay, this is not good. This is the reason why, you know, phones should be banned or kind of filtered or something should be done.
Well,
As you
look,
say, hmm?
are simple little Nokia phones there that keep people in touch with one another. I mean, if a child needs a phone, that to me is the only phone they need. They don't need all this other stuff, which actually brings a world onto their shoulders that they're not ready to shoulder,
Yeah.
and bring situations into their lives that really has no place in their lives.
Yeah, I just think like, that if they do have, if they had a phone and you could extend it onto computers and laptops, iPads, the whole lot, that basically has a chip built into it with bands of age groups, okay, signed by the parent in the shop. I think that kind of levels it and does away with it. Anyway, I'll move on to my next question for you. So, would a parent verified child safe phone be better than asking children to prove their age online through digital ID? So, at the moment, children, the idea of the digital ID is that children would have to, their details will be uploaded, which I don't like, and then they'd have to verify their age each time they go onto a website, which is a bit cumbersome and a bit silly.
I mean, I think anything actually that provides parents, as I said, with help in supervising their children's well-being and welfare is a plus. Um, you know, uh, and I think obviously when it comes to the phones, there's a real need for that. But I mean, maybe your idea, would sell to some of these phone companies, but I can't understand why. I mean, you have child's bicycles, tricycles. You have child's this, child's that, child's the other thing. Why in the world can't you have a child's phone that
No.
has the basic necessities? To me, the purpose of the phone is actually to keep in touch with people, especially family. So why isn't there something, for children? I would say, to me, children are all the way up until 17 years old because they're still children. Why isn't there something provided? And there certainly would be a market for it, no doubt about it,
I think it would be
because
good. Yeah.
parents won't take the phones away from children.
Yeah.
I met a parent there last year, and she said her daughter, who was a second year in high school, was the only child in the class who did not have a phone,
You see
and she
there.
and
Mm-mm.
and she said that not having the phone, like you said, helped her as well to be more sociable with her classmates who tended to be stuck on their phones, you know.
Well, I'll give you an example of that. That can also cause ostracization, but she could be ostracized. But the thing is, my niece, very clever girl called Emily, and Emily decided she was having nothing to do with mobile phones and social media. Very clever. From
Hmm.
about the age of, I think about the age of 14, 15, she decided, no, this is not, I'm sick of this. Okay, my friends are all fighting online, they're hiding behind screens. So she decided enough is enough, done with social media. And she excelled more in her schoolwork, right?
I bet.
And another thing was in terms of like being able to focus, they were in a music class basically, and the kids were always preoccupied with their social media. And Emily excelled in music to the point where she was streets ahead of them in terms of music, and the ability to concentrate. The children couldn't concentrate on the music because they're so agitated from social media, I think.
It's like the girl that you referred to in the store, you can't be like a fish, you can't have one eye on the hook and the other eye on the bait. You can only focus on one thing at a time. I mean, this whole bit about multitasking is the biggest cardiology of all time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just simply impossible because when you multitask, you try to do two things at the same time, you don't do either one of them very well. And so, like your niece, she's able to give her full attention to what matters.
Yeah, and
So she's not distracted, by what a text that she might have received or what is going on in Timbuktu or whatever it is, you know. And also, I just saw a study done in America as well, where they're now saying that addiction, to the phones actually has had a reduction in the number of people getting married because they have no time to date. They have no time to converse with one another. They have no time they don't spend time with one another
yeah,
because they're phones are getting in the way.
Yeah,
I mean,
mm,
it's
awful.
like any addiction. You
And
lose your freedom.
I think what as well as what it does is it prevents the young person from spending time with the older and appreciating the older generation. The phone
Exactly.
is a barrier to that, I think.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, you see it even in restaurants, with where families are, they're on their phones. There's no conversation going on, nothing. You see, and I mean, it is an addiction. And you see, they're afraid that they might miss something, but they don't quite know what it is they're missing. But what they're really missing, of course, is what you're saying. They're really missing conversation, and
Yeah,
conversation builds community.
yeah,
And without community, then, as we've said before in other videos, contributes to loneliness. And I think that's why so many young people today are so lonely and they're so depressed because they have no real friends. Their friends are virtual to a large extent, and there's no conversation, so there's no self-discovery. So I would
yes,
say, look, give them a phone that doesn't distract them.
yes. Practical. The thing is, look, with all my nieces and nephews, I have 13 or 14 of them. What I eventually did was because I was very active with them when they were younger, bringing them places and showing them things, and particularly with my
Mhm.
niece Emily. But I banned the phone if we were going on long trips in the car. If we were going on long
Mm.
trips in the car, the idea was we'd engage in conversation, the radio would be off, and they can look out the window, look at the world, okay? And I always said that to them, okay, when you get into the car, the phone's dead. I don't want any phones on. And that was my rule. And it was a great rule. And it meant they engaged in conversation. We had a great time, a great day out, you know?
You're absolutely right. Because I remember myself, in America, we used to take youngsters on retreats, for a weekend. But that was one of the rules. You leave your phone behind, you leave your radio behind, you leave anything, that takes you away from being present to the rest of your peers behind. And of course, there was, they huffed and puffed and tried to blow the house down. But after they got there, they didn't even think about them because they got involved with one another. They got involved in the whole treat process. They got involved in the presentations. They got involved in the discussions. And by the end, by Sunday evening, they totally forgotten about those things. So it's interesting. See, they found actually they had another means of communicating with others. Come to find out, that they had similar stories, they had similar concerns, which they didn't even know about before.
Yeah, I think, look, that mobile phones create, for young people, to create a constant state of anxiety and possibly depression, which also feeds in later into addiction, you know?
True, because you're always trying to alleviate the problem, aren't you?
Alleviate the
And
pain and then eventually. So anyway,
yeah,
so the analogy I gave you earlier on about the nightclub basically was that at the moment, if we take an analogy like a nightclub, um, with the EU system, the child goes up to the nightclub and then they're asked for ID each time. My idea is that the child goes up to the nightclub and that straight away they're recognized as a child and that's shut down. So that's in a chip in the phone that when they go online, basically, and it recognizes this person's 13 is going to be 14 on the whatever next August. It recognizes it straight away and they're shut off. They don't even realize what's happening in the background. They're just shut off. That's it. Rather than having to kind of verify their age and upload their details and etc. You know. So
yeah,
should the responsibility begin with the parent and the phone provider rather than leaving children to deal with age checks on every website and app?
absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely, 100%,
Okay.
100%. And And I think that that would actually create a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties. It would also allow children to be children and allow teenagers to be teenagers. Because right now they're not allowed because they're fed so much stuff, that their age is incapable of dealing with. But all it does is put huge burdens on their shoulders which they can't deal with. And that's not right. To me, that's a form of child abuse, you know, because when you're expecting a child to cope with something that is not their problem and they're not capable of dealing with it, that's actually, being abusive to the child. So yes, absolutely, the parents. Now you're probably aware of this, but there's also, in Australia, they have come up with this thing called, My ID app, and the description is that it serves as a government's digital ID system, allowing the users to access participating online services, rental applications, statute declarations, highlighting privacy and convenience. Now, I haven't seen it myself, I just read a description of it.
Hmm.
So that might be something, that would be worth researching as well. It's called My ID, capital letters, ID app.
Okay. See, the thing about it is, what I'm looking at is that the reason I say the chip on the phone is because the idea is that the child's information, the child's identity, okay, is not spread out into the internet. Okay. So
That's
the
right.
idea is that if the parent goes to Vodafone into the shop and says, okay, I want a phone for my child, the child picks out the phone. They say, okay, that's a child-friendly phone that has a chip in that, and basically she can't see anything on the internet. Basically, that she shouldn't see, and therefore there's no real identity of the child going online. They just it's basically like the chip anonymizes the child, right? Um, and there's no uploading details that little Marie, who's 14, she's registering with us now, and now we fire it back to her that she can't come in. There's none of that messing.
Yeah, I agree there, because I think the less information, that the government receives, the better off people are. The
Yeah,
less information that's put out there it creates the lesser opportunity to use that information, not for the good of people, but to control the people. And I think that's a problem. I think the
yeah,
whole digital thing, from the government is another attempt actually to control. And the thing about it is that, whatever the government does is not always, 100% verified. And I think it leaves it open as well to companies to bypass to see what the government comes up with. But I think your idea is safer, and there's less risk that anybody can come in and kind of try to bypass, that chip. And also, as you said again, it puts the responsibility for supervision and raising children right in the hands of the parents as well. And I think that's great. I think it's so
yeah.
important.
And, it's at the root of the problem, but also it puts the responsibility with the phone maker. So
True,
the
true.
child is then protected before they even go online.
And it's also a challenge, you see, to the phone makers and providers to see whether or not they truly care about the well-being of children. I
Yeah.
think the problem in the culture today is that governments see no problem in exposing children to stuff that's way beyond their capacity to deal with. And we see that in terms, for example, of the programs on sexuality. We see that in terms of what children are exposed to, even on the internet. I see all the time where they provide these so-called nanny programs, but youngsters seem to be able to get around them very easily. Because they're technology savvy, or else they keep like the hackers, they keep at it till they find some way around it. I think what you're saying, is, I think, a practical answer to the problem that children are being used and abused through within in social media today, and that their growth is actually their psychological, emotional, spiritual, moral growth is actually being stunted by these phones, by the stuff that they're able to access in these phones.
I'll give you an example. Companies can do this all over the world, and here's a perfect example. Okay. Microsoft. So Microsoft has Office 365. So Office 365 is basically tied to your identity, right? And you can
Mhm.
only use certain programs. So you might sign up for Microsoft, say Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, but then you have things
Mhm.
like Visio, and if you pay the extra, okay, this is all cloud based. So
Right.
The technology is very, very much there to do all this stuff. It's the will to do it.
Yes, and you know the old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. Where there's no will, there ain't no way.
Yeah, so there's a will on the part of the public, on the part of parents, but there isn't a will with the tech companies because it involves billions of pounds, obviously.
But I think if the parents, you see, here again is where, sadly, in our culture today, you know, there seem to be no organization of parents, you know. I remember in America, this is way back in the 70s when the whole civil rights thing was active. I remember the children in school that had parties, you see, and then they would just invite and it was supposed to be a school party, but anyway, they just invite just their friends. So we had a meeting with all the parents, all the parents, and stated that if there was a school party, then every person would be invited. And the parents agreed and supported it. But you see, there seems to be no organization of parents in this country. And I think if there was an organization of parents, then I think the phone companies would listen. You know yourself, Oliver, if one person speaks the truth, people tend to ignore him or her. But if 30 people speak the truth, then they get a listening ear. So
Yeah.
so there is power in numbers, and I think parents forget that.
Yeah, the collective voice. I mean, that's a very good point. That if you have, I suppose what you're talking about really is a community,
Yes, exactly.
which is kind
Exactly.
of in short supply at the moment in a lot of
It
areas.
is. And this is where I think too, you see, that the leadership of the church, they have a they have a marvelous opportunity to start forming community
Yeah.
because they have a foot practically in every part of the country. They have a built-in structure, but they're not forming community. They're just taking community for granted. Now, when I was growing up, there was a strong community. But today there isn't because people have become disjointed, and you have all the different people coming into the country, and you also have people who have turned in more and more in themselves rather than out to one another. So there isn't real need to form community, and I do think the only organization that can actually form community is the church. Now the GA has a kind of community, but that's kind of particular, you know. I think that the church has far more opportunities to really bring people together and as a group then address the issues.
Yes. My brother always praises the Scouts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
He said
Yes.
he learned so much in the Scouts. He says he always remembers the Scouts then in Wicklow and that he loved all this and he loved the camaraderie and they were all like little soldiers and they were all learning how to make fires from nothing and stuff and all these different things. So I think like, if there were small little groups with adults where they bring children out to places like that and then kind of do a study of them and let them know that it's part of a study. You leave your mobile phone home today. Today we're going to, for example, to the bog and we're going to fill a trailer of turf. Okay,
Right.
things that I used to do as a child and you yourself, or
Yes.
we're going to make hay with a local farmer today and you're going to learn how to make hay or silage or whatever it is. Um, Great stuff.
Absolutely. And like the scouts, I mean, they taught them principles as well, principles about life, like the whole idea. I know in America, the scouts, their mantra was be prepared, and they taught them skills and so on. I mean, the young people today really have no skills because they've not been taught and they haven't been provided with the opportunity anyway that calls for particular skills.
Yeah, I think I tell you what's sad. What's sad is that the young kids today don't seem to have any interest in their peers.
True.
They have no interest in people that are elderly. They're just completely
True.
detached. Okay. And I remember as a child in Kerry talking to neighbours and loving talking to the old men on the road. And there was a man,
Right.
Paddy Enright, he used to pick flowers for Kitty every day, right? And Paddy
Hmm.
was 83 and his wife, Kitty, was extremely possessive of him, even in their
Hmm.
80s. Okay.
Right.
So to appease her, Paddy used to walk up the hill in Knockananoon where we lived, right? From his farm.
Hmm.
and he had a bad knee, and he'd picked tiny little daisies, and we used to walk behind him laughing, okay, looking at the little daisies, the flowers, because they were so
Sure.
small. It was the smallest bunch of flowers in the world, right?
Right,
And
right.
he was limping with his leg, going home to Kitty, and we used to say to him, "Who are the flowers for?" And he used to say, "They're for Kitty. I pick flowers for my Kitty every day."
Wow. Yeah,
So we
I
used to
tell you
engage with
what.
all these people, and then there was
Yeah.
Matt and Mary Doran. They lived on the hill. And Matt and Mary had no electricity and they had a light. This is just before we left Kerry in 1977, I think it was. And
Hmm.
Matt and Mary shared a big oval plate and there was millions of cracks on it. Okay. And what they used to
Hmm.
do was she'd say to him, she'd say, "You're eating all the meat," and they'd be fighting with the forks and we'd be laughing as little kids. They'd be dragging the meat across and it
Like
was and we
pulling
were
covers away from each other in bed.
It was unreal. And then we used to see
Yeah.
Mary in the morning, and she used to have what used to look like a magpie's nest. She used to pick kippines, a word that's gone out of Irish language now, you know. And so there was all these things we used to integrate with the locals. It was fantastic, and we continued that in Dublin as children, our father always
Yeah.
encouraged us to talk to all people everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's missing. See, there's no conversation, and because there's no conversation, there's no reflection. And because there's no reflection, you see, there's no sense of who one is or what one is about, or what gifts a person has, or what interests a person has. Because most people today are completely unreflected. And I forget who it was that said, the unreflected life is not worth living. And that's why people don't think life is worth living, because
Mhm.
there's no reflection. They don't get the mystery of themselves.
The other thing we had, the only technology we had really when I was 10, 11, 12, say 13, 14, we faded it out. We had a CB radio
Right.
and we used to be able to talk to people all over Dublin. And we thought this was
Yes.
fascinating as children, right? Okay.
Oh,
And
of
we,
course, of course.
and we'd actually be talking to adults as children, having a good old conversation with them. Okay. It was all
Sure,
very,
sure.
very innocent, and they'd be asking us about, our lives, and we'd be asking them, "What do you do?" And there'd be some fella would say, "I'm a truck driver. I go around, from Dublin to wherever," and we'd all be laughing and asking, and then winding them up as little kids. And so we had a great fun with the CB radio, and it was very innocent. But the CB radio is built on the idea of community.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah, uh, yeah, and I mean, and even the radio back then was also created, to bring you the news and to entertain you. You see, there's really, I mean, the news today, is made up. It's fake news, as Trump in America used to say, it is fake news, and it's not really reporting the fact, and there's really not much entertainment either. I mean, when listen to the bad language, that people use, like comedians or whatnot, that's not entertainment to me. I mean, that's a form of abuse. But to answer your question, I think that anything, that frees people from isolating themselves is a good thing. And going back again, to the phones, I think anything that helps to free children and teenagers from what isolates them is a good thing. I think, you're what you're recommending there, I think, is a step in that direction.
It is indeed. So I think, look, we might have a little bit of a solution there. And of course, Christian TV Ireland, we always come up with the solutions. We don't just criticize.
There you go.
Very
That's
good.
right. Yeah.
So,
Don't
Father, do you
just
want to? Yeah, go ahead.
They don't just complain, come up with some kind of an answer to deal with the issue so we can move on and learn from it and become better as a result of it.
Excellent stuff. Okay. So, do you want to give us your blessing there?
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord let his face shine upon you. May he be gracious to you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you, Oliver,
Thank you, Father. Good
and
evening.
all your listeners. Thank you very much.